Hi, everyone. This is Zach Suter. This is the first episode of Shaping the Industry, where we interview people from around the music industry about like various aspects in the music business. With this week, we have JJ Italiano on, and he's done a lot of things with everyone. He's like helped manage the Flobots. He did the marketing campaign for Gotye's making mirrors. Um, yeah, he's worked at a ton of different record companies, and also interviewing with us is Milena, and she's a student with me at UCD, and she'll be helping me ask JJ about his experience marketing people. JJ, do you have anything else to say?
No, I feel like that's a pretty good intro. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. Um, so I think we'll just start. Like the purpose of this episode is to really figure out how marketing has changed over the past 10 years. And like in the music industry, there's been a lot of change. And I think marketing, especially with the internet and with how many different ways there is to get your music, like I feel like marketing has changed the most or has been really impacted by this. So what do you think has been the biggest change in the past 10 years, like on the marketing side of things?
So I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty on my end, but I think the question was, what are the biggest changes in marketing over the past 10 years? Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
cool. So, well, I mean, man, 10 years is like a super long span. So I think almost everything has changed over the course of the last 10 years. Um, I think for marketing in any industry is dealing with some of that. Um, but the biggest shift is in how much focus gets put on a release date or comes into the actual product of an album. I think that marketing, for the most part, was really straightforward in the 90s in terms of just promoting a release that came out on a particular date. And then, you hoped people went to the store and bought that release. So, uh, the majority of the marketing in the past was done in advance of an album being out, and now it's not quite that way. I think now probably the single biggest change has been in that aspect that like something once something's out doesn't mean that that's the end of marketing it. As a matter of fact, now I feel like most of the marketing, uh, most good marketers are focused on a product after it's released.
Okay. Um, like what is something that you see like bands do that you think like is just like a really bad idea? Like are they holding on to like things that would have been true 10 to 20 years ago, but today it just doesn't make a lot of sense to do when they're marketing their albums and stuff?
Yeah, I think bands and even labels and managers and stuff come by it honestly, because there aren't any really clear answers. So a lot of the time you'll see, there are a lot of people that are adamantly traditionalists, and then there are a lot of people that are adamantly, well, this is the future. We don't need that anymore. We don't need a release date anymore. We don't need a physical product anymore. And the reason why it's a slippery kind of slope is because not one way is more true. We're in this long transition phase. So the recorded music industry was about had a good 80 years of being, for the most part, the same, and now is in a transition phase that may last 10 or 20 years before we really see it shift completely. So I think I personally really try to avoid the concept of a rollout, focusing on one album. I think that uh, marketing effectively really is about selling an entire artist as a brand instead of focusing specifically on a product. But some people don't do it that way. Some people are still very much traditionalists in the sense that they'll go for just one product. And I don't think that they're wrong. There's no real right or wrong way right now, because we're in this transitional time when that both sides are going to be right a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but the biggest, I mean, if there's one, man, it's hard to focus on one overwhelming mistake I feel like people make. And I try not to be too critical about um, people's mistakes, because a lot of the time something I might think is a really foolish decision may turn out being a really good decision.
Hmm.
And it really depends on your audience, and it depends on what kind of music it is. And like most things, there's a lot of luck involved. So you might do something that seems really silly, but for whatever reason, it drums up some enthusiasm. So I tend not to hate on other people's marketing strategies, but I myself, one thing that's maybe a little bit, when people focus too much on an album release in the future, I think that I always disagree with that. I'm not always right, but I usually disagree with that.
Okay. Melinda, do you have feel free to jump in whenever you want.
Yeah. JJ, I know we talk a lot about all the changes in the industry, but is there anything that you've seen that the industry just doesn't really want to let go of in terms of marketing strategies?
Oh man, yeah, plenty. I feel like if you spend even a small amount of time at a major label, you'll see dramatic instances of clinging to the past. Man, I'd say, I mean, a perfectly good example is this new global release date that's getting announced, or that they're moving this summer to have all albums release on the same day, on Friday instead of Tuesday, and then different days depending on region. Which honestly, like, as silly as that seems, I do think that that's a reasonable way to try to, to fight albums being available on BitTorrent before they're available in the iTunes store. But, again, this idea that the audience is waiting with bated breath for new releases is very old school, because there was scarcity before. And I think more often than anything, that's the thing that I think the record business specifically really clings to that's outdated, is this concept that somehow there's scarcity in the marketplace, that that 50 albums are going to get everyone's attention, when the reality is there's going to be thousands of albums that get thousands of people's attention, and you're in a constant state of competition to be able to win over new fans and win over new customers. So I mean, I think like this release date thing is a major thing that people cling to. Obviously, I think right now what people are clinging to is the idea of ownership. Like, there's a lot of people that really just do not like this idea of moving into streaming as the primary way that human beings consume music. And that's probably the best example of something that maybe you can split down the middle. I think half of people really think that this is a bad thing, and half of people think it's a good thing. But it affects 100% of people. I'm not sure anybody really has a choice. That's the reality, and that's the future that we're moving into. So, yeah, man, we could take 2 hours just talk. I could give you a laundry list of things that are outdated that people are clinging to.
Yeah.
Those are some good ones. Some good introductories.
So how do you feel about, like, artists recently just not even announcing their albums and just dropping it on a random day? Or like just dropping it without any buzz before?
I love it, man. For me personally, I think that's. I mean, there's two sides of that coin. If you're a small band or small artist and you do that, there's a keen possibility that, quite frankly, I don't know that you hurt yourself or you help yourself all that much. I think what matters is that when people hear you, they hear about your band or hear about your music, that they can listen to your best product as quickly as possible. I think that's how you convert fans. So having music available is pretty important. I would say for a big artist like Drake, it creates a story in and of itself. I mean, it's a genius thing. It's like, what's the story that you want to tell about Drake? So rather than drum up a whole PR campaign and everything, the story about Drake is that he released his album and nobody knew about it. And if you're reading it, it's too late, and you're already, if you missed this, you're not in the know. It's a slam dunk. So it ends up being a great marketing play in and of itself, because the internet is such that, internet press or blogs, or really any press outlet, it's all about being the first person to break that story. So you'll see if BuzzFeed posts something, then all the major news outlets will just repost that thing that BuzzFeed posted. We saw that with the stupid dress thing, right? And when everybody thinks that they might be the first one to do it, or like they might be maybe one of the first 50 people to do it, everybody does it. So for artists that already have a certain degree of celebrity, I think it's a great idea to just release an album and not do any rollout. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw almost everyone do that from here on out. I think that that's going to happen a lot, with the exception of big pop acts like Taylor Swift will probably never do that. But I think a lot of people that are already famous will end up doing that. It's the cheapest publicity stunt you can possibly pull off.
Yeah. So where do you think like you draw the line for like a band to either do that or not to do that?
Well, so traditional press outlets like radio stations, TV, my dog is going to join the conversation here. Say hi, Rosie. Traditional radio stations, traditional like TV shows, the Tonight Show and stuff like that. Those places really want, like, they're still kind of adhering to this idea of a release date. And traditional publicity is all about when's the release. So I think it's going to take a while for the tide to turn for those people to where like maybe they stop asking that question. But in the meantime, they will be. So anybody that is, if your goal is to maybe sell more of the brand of the artist and their celebrity, a band like One Direction, who is like, it's really not about their records. Like, it's a little bit about their records, but it's more about like cute kids that like teenage girls want to go see. So I would avoid doing a, you know, if the goal is to do a publicity campaign around the celebrity of somebody, you might still want to adhere to a release date. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't really think that there are any rules. I don't think it hurts you that much to just get rid of all that, especially for early bands. Like any independent bands or any local bands that would be watching this, I would say release your music as soon as humanly possible, because like you can always make more. And a major hang up for a lot of people is they go, okay, well, we just get this record perfect. We'll just get this record perfect. And no matter how much time you spend doing that, it's not like how it was where you would release a record and everyone know about it. It might take a year of your music being out there before people discover it. So I think it's a waste of time. I think like have stuff out there, always be getting better, always ship. If you're a brand new artist, if you already have fans, then be a lot more critical about your follow-up albums. But if you're just starting out, there's no reason to wait. Just put it all out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so like with the Flobots, what did you like? What was your plan for them when you were first starting out?
With Flobots?
Yeah.
That's a great example. So there's a band that, you know, they were friends of mine, and I was young when I started managing them, but I still waited out for a minute until I knew that I could actually do something for them, and I felt confident myself as a manager. And then by the time I did, you know, we pushed through and made an album that we were really proud of, but it was pretty DIY. We didn't spend a lot of money making the Flobots first record, and the record that Universal released was the exact same thing. We didn't touch it up. We didn't re-record it. We didn't even remaster it. So like the drums on that record were recorded in a tough shed, you know. That record is pretty punk rock, and we didn't need to. So there's an example of, we just took that record and then, you know, basically handed it over to Universal, and with almost no changes. So that was an example of having something out being really, really advantageous. Mm-hmm. So if I would have never been able to do anything with that band if we didn't have that record out and available, because at least in the Denver market, and to a lesser extent in LA, people heard the record, they liked the record, they called the radio station, asked them to play Handlebars. They bought the record, and those were the things that really got the record business to take notice. So I'd love to say that like I was just such a great mover and shaker, I was so charming that record labels wanted to sign the band. And the reality is that record labels are much smarter than that, and they can look at their Excel spreadsheet and see who's selling records when they get played on the radio. That's what happened. So all of a sudden, I made a lot of new friends in the major label business. You know, so it's another advantage to having product out.
Mm-hmm. And going off of that, like what was kind of your job description as product manager for Gotye's album? Like, what did that look like?
Well, so my situation was somewhat unorthodox there. But for the most part, so a product manager at a label is kind of I think the best way to describe it is everything that happens before the record is done is the A&R department, So that includes the artwork and everything, like and the making of a product. They're kind of like the research and development, and they're also kind of like they hand you everything to make happen. And everything that happens after that record is made is typically handled by the marketing department. So you have an A&R guy, and then you have your product manager. So the product manager is like the guy in charge for that, or guy or girl in charge of that thing from that moment forward. So my situation at Universal was a little strange because it was pretty unorthodox. It was a crazy time for that label. I don't think that anybody really knew what to do with me at the time. I kind of did a lot. I did a lot more than most people do. And then I did a lot less than, I didn't do some things that most product managers do. But, most product managers, your responsibility is to make sure that everything goes well. So you're going to make sure that everybody at that label knows every single detail that they need to know. You coordinate how you're going to roll out that marketing plan. You coordinate with all the other departments. And just make sure you're kind of in charge of making sure it all goes well. And if it doesn't, you're usually the first guy to get fired. So guy or girl. So that's kind of on the label side. It's not, in a weird way, it's kind of like managing a band, except you're not managing the band. You're managing the label. That's a good way to say it. So as it relates to this project, your job is to make sure that everybody is taken care of, they have their stuff together, that there's a vision, and you try to make that vision come true.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of. I think it's going to vary product manager to project manager,
Yeah.
but that was the way I saw it. When I listened, I didn't spend that much time in those jobs, but that was that was the way I understood it from my Gonzo experience.
Yeah. So, which experience do you prefer? Do you like working at those like huge labels, or did you prefer like kind of doing the startup thing?
Well, I wish I could tell you I had a choice. I mean, like I almost like never even get a chance to say I like one thing or another. This dog is like, she's such a ham. But like, when as a manager, I think I'm much better at being a artist manager than probably anything else. I'm also pretty confident as a producer because I think that they're the same, very similar jobs in the spiritual and psychological sense. Working at a label is challenging because I think a skill set that I don't possess. It's like it is the idea of work and being able to understand, politics and make sure people, other people's feelings don't get hurt and all kinds of other stuff. And I can tend to maybe be a little idealistic and a little. You want me to re-say that?
Yeah, sorry, like the internet kind of dropped and got weird.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So where'd you lose me?
Right as you started.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, great. So between the two, I think there's a skill set. I think I'm a much better artist manager. I think I'm a better producer. I work just not really out of preference, but out of experience. It's been easier for me to work on a project where I have a little more control. Okay. And that's not for any reason other than probably for a lack of having done it a lot the other way. So the hardest thing about working in a label system is that there's a lot of people working there with a lot of opinions about what you should do, and they're political environments, because people have been getting laid off like crazy at record labels for the last 10 years. So you can upset a lot of people without realizing you upset people. And that was my experience. Like, I was used to feeling like, okay, great. If we're, everything's positive, if this project works, and I'll do anything to get it done. I don't know. I think that I kind of butted heads with people I didn't know until after the fact, but I think I upset a lot of people in the label system just by being maybe too bossy or being too much of a jerk. And I didn't even realize it at the time. So I think of myself as being like really nice and really easy to work with.
Yeah.
But you know, I also am really strongly opinionated about what direction to go in once I want to go in that direction. And I'm with artists, you know, right away if you upset them or you stepped on their toes. An artist will flip out and throw a beer bottle at you or something, you know. I'm like, okay, cool, fine, we'll do it. You know, what? Like, okay, what can we do? How can we change? Whereas I think in the label system, people don't throw beer bottles at you so much as they plot how they're going to destroy you. It's a lot more. It's like King's Landing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I like being on my own a little bit more, but I don't like I sure like having a job. It's nice when you're making a steady paycheck. It's a lot easier than when you're running your own business, especially in the music business where it's so volatile. You know, like, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the record company is like real life Game of Thrones.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's like, it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm great. It's exactly like that. I feel like I was kind of Ned Stark at Universal Republic. I think I got my head chopped off for maybe just being too idealistic and not realizing where I was.
Mm-hmm.
But,
so, what has been one of the most creative marketing plans that you've seen recently? Like you've seen or done?
Let me think about that. Most creative marketing strategies. What's working? Well, and I might be calling baloney here or whatever, but I think they did a hell of a job with the Taylor Swift record. I think they did a lot of the right things, and I think they covered a lot of angles. So I think they got a lot of free press with that Spotify controversy, which probably made friends with other people that have conflicting interests with Spotify, and was a good values. I think it was a good statement of value for, you know, why is Taylor Swift better than everybody else? I think that left a good impression. You know, the whole thing with her playing a fan's wedding and stuff like that. I think that was a great little publicity stunt, and it works. That stuff works. So I think they did a great job there. Whether or not that was the most creative, you know, I'm not 100% sure. There's a million different ways to be creative, especially and the Drake thing, man. The Drake thing was fantastic. Actually, that's it. Best, most creative marketing strategy so far. That Drake release where I put my Instagram and people are doing, you know, like now that's become a meme font, you know, so now you can type anything in that Drake record font. Hell of an idea. Fantastic idea. So that became like a visual meme that will then draw you back to Drake. And that's especially in like hip hop blog community is everywhere. So that was far and away the coolest, in my opinion. That just crushed Instagram with one album art thing over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
Pretty smart. Yeah.
Do you think that would have worked like 10 years ago?
Well, it wasn't any Instagram 10 years ago, but
like to just drop an album.
Oh, to just drop an album?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
It wouldn't have. You really had to, 10 years ago, you really had to go through the grind. You really had to go through, even 5 years ago. I mean, things are moving pretty fast. If you dropped a record without, you know, I mean, that sounds like crazy, but even 5 years ago, like, gosh, you really get lost in the mix of things because radio was still so important. It's still important, but radio is way more important. And if you don't have something out there kind of in advance when you have a record dropping, it's very difficult to get the press to go along. And, you know, yeah, definitely. I think this is a kind of a new archetype, and I still think it only works on the polar sides of the spectrum. Really big artists and really small artists will benefit from that, where a lot of the people in the middle may still need to really consider their marketing strategy.
So if you're like if you're doing the marketing for the Drake album and the album drops, what would be your next step?
Well, well, first and foremost, I'm not going to tell anybody else how to do their job. Whoever's in charge of that Drake record is doing a hell of a job. They're doing a great job. So my first answer is whatever they're going to do, because I'm happy to copy that idea. Drake is so straightforward because he's a big celebrity, you know, so you're going to get all the press and publicity that you really want. Editorial wise, that record's got a lot of legs because they don't really, I mean, they'll hammer the heck out of radio, but they almost don't need it because the record seems to be really loved by almost everyone. It's a good album. The editorial press they're getting is fantastic. Touring numbers will be fantastic. So they can chill, man. That they don't. This is kind of like it's a music industry kind of thing where like you tend to be really praised for the easiest jobs you do, and you tend to not really get a lot of credit for the hardest jobs. Drake to me is one of those things where you can afford to make a lot of mistakes. When you make an album that's that good and they set it up as well as they have, they can make a lot of mistakes. And most of what they need to do now is obvious. It's just kind of like pumping that out. But, you know, again, and I've said this about the Gotye thing, it's like, as a marketer, certainly that's the thing I did. And that's a big record. But that record had a lot of legs, and I'd love to take a lot of credit for it. But I could have made a lot of mistakes. I think they did make a lot of mistakes after I was gone. I think that's why it didn't last as long as it did. But man, when you got a single that hot and you got a video that hot, it's like you can do a lot of stuff. You can do a lot of stuff, and you're probably going to be fine. So that's one of the cool things about the internet age is kind of like, and the difference between, there used to be a massive paywall between whether or not in converting fans because you had to buy the CD. So it's like 10, you know, let's say 15 years ago, this Drake record comes out and not everybody knows it's good. Yeah. You know, they just have to trust that maybe it's good, and you're still grinding and try to get them to pay that $15. Like now, I saw on Instagram, what is this? Why is everyone writing in this font? And I go, oh, it means there's a Drake record. Genius. And then I download the Drake record on Spotify, and I'm like, this record's awesome. And then we're all in the same pool, you know? So everybody in the pool, we all love Drake now. It didn't take long. So that was kind of, you know, I don't know. It's a different age. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that they can, it almost doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter when you set it up as crazy. The most brilliant things they did, they've already done.
Yeah.
So kind of off that, what do you think you're selling now? Do you think of yourself as someone that markets music, or do you think of yourself as someone that like markets experiences?
It depends on the artist. So this is something I talk about in classes and stuff, is understanding what your product is of the whole process. So if you know, you can kind of get an idea for what you're going to be selling. You're going to be selling concert tickets, you're going to be selling records, what are you going to be selling? And understanding what that product's going to be is clutch. So you got to get that first. I like to think of one of my like many aphorisms is that like the music industry has become more like every other industry in the world. So it used to be very cookie cutter. We did, you know, you made records, you toured, blah, 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 blah. And now it's like you have a brand. If you think of an artist as a brand, which it carries with it its own ideology, it carries with it its own sense of style, it's got its own kind of characteristics, and people are invested in it or they're not. And so as a manager, I'm always trying to think of things from a bigger picture, like what is a product that our audience will find compelling enough that they'll pay for it. So for some people, that'll end up being an album. Like Taylor Swift will sell music on iTunes. So that's, you know, it makes sense to not have that on Spotify. Most of the artists that I work with are usually pretty weird. Like you'd be hard fought to find anything I've done that seemed easy, because I'm kind of weird and I like music that's kind of weird, and I'm always like pleasantly surprised how many other weird people there are out there once we actually get something out. But so what you make, it's just got to be something they're worth, that they think is worth giving you money. So example is like, that's how any business works. Tesla right now is making electric cars. They're making electric cars for people that are really, really wealthy, right? So because that's how they put money into Tesla. So it makes sense to make a really nice sports car and then make a nice luxury sedan, because that's who their audience is, and that's how they can pump money into the system. Mm-hmm. The goal for that company is not to sell luxury cars. The goal for that company is to make electric cars the primary source of transportation for people to save the planet. And so now that now that more money's in the ecosystem and that this awareness is built, they're going, their goal is to make a $35,000 electric car. That's dope. So that's part of understanding your audience and making a product that's tailored for your audience. Mm-hmm. So if I only have a couple hundred fans, but they're super, super, super like dedicated and they're crazy about it, I'm going to make expensive products that are still a good value for them. And if I'm Taylor Swift, I'm going to sell as many $1.29 singles as I could possibly sell. Yeah. So it's kind of like it. I think that's not exactly like a product manager job, but it's something product managers can do. I think it's not necessarily a marketer's job, but I think that focusing on product that's the key to the modern music industry. And when people look at the music industry as being this thing that's like an asymptote and we're all going under and we're all screwed, I think that people are missing that point, which is that you can have an audience, however big, easier now than you could before, or certainly more cheaply. And if you understand your audience and you make a product they want to buy, you're in business. It's like any other business in the world.
Yeah. So going off of that Spotify Taylor Swift thing, what are some of your opinions on the whole free streaming websites, and do you think they're helping the industry or hurting the industry and artists?
Yeah, I mean, it varies artist to artist. For me personally, I am a huge proponent of Spotify. I think that it's a great company. I understand where the criticism comes. I think that there needs to be more competition in this space, and I think that part of the reason why the prices are stuck, there's a lot of controversy here, but like Spotify didn't dictate those royalty rates. Those royalty rates were agreed to by publishers and labels who got equity in Spotify. So mm-hmm. They price fix the market themselves, and so it's not just Spotify's fault. So that'd be the first argument. The second argument is that it's easy to forget that people were Spotify is competing with piracy more than they're competing with iTunes. Like I wasn't buying stuff on iTunes anyway, right? Most computer literate men ages 16 to 30 were not buying music on iTunes, right? And so punk rock got killed, right? Rock music got killed. All the stuff that went to that demographic got destroyed. I feel like that's really obvious. So the stuff that's not selling on iTunes tends to do better on Spotify. So it's great for my genres and for the stuff that I work on. I like the idea that the fans can get music and they can get it in such a way that's controlled. And at the very least, I can get an idea of how well we're connecting. I couldn't measure BitTorrent traffic. So that's a cool thing. My artists also make pretty decent money on Spotify. So certainly by comparison to their iTunes numbers. So it's not quite as much, but it's getting there. And I think that this argument is very much, the same kind of thing. It's like you get people that are adamantly on one side or adamantly on the other side. And it might be a 20-year transition. It's a transitional period. I think we're all kind of hurting for it. But the one thing nobody is, it's worth jumping up and down and celebrating when you consider that you have like a little computer in your pocket that can play any song in the world whenever you want it. That's just not easy. I think Spotify more than has earned the 30% of their revenue that they're keeping for themselves. And I think we're fortunate to have them. I think those royalty rates will go up but they're not going to go up by beating up Spotify or having Taylor Swift pull her stuff down. Those royalty rates are going to go up when other streaming services make products that are as good as Spotify or better, and then have a competition of what those royalties will be like to the artists and to the labels and to the publishers. So if, let's say, for example, if Beats Music was significantly better product than Spotify and paid better royalty rates, users would gravitate towards it, and then artists would pull their stuff off Spotify and put it on Beats Music or Deezer or whatever. So I think in the coming years, I think this problem is going to solve itself quicker than people think it is. I just don't think that this problem is going to solve itself the way people think it will. I think people think that we're going to solve this problem by getting lawyers involved and everyone negotiating their licenses individually and not using any other publishing companies and blah, 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 blah. When the reality is, it's capitalism, this is the economy we live in. If somebody builds a better mousetrap, or they build a mousetrap that can do the same job for less expense, it's going to work in the free market. It's just right now, there's just not a lot of competition out there. I mean, there are, but Spotify product wise is far and away heads and shoulders above everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think Spotify can improve on, or its competitors? What are something that you're just constantly disappointed in Spotify right now?
Messaging should work in the iOS app. Spotify, if you're listening to me, fix messaging in the iOS app. It's crazy. Spotify's Android product is actually pretty great, but I think that the messaging features, if somebody sends me a playlist on Spotify, I should be able to reply to them. It's completely crazy that I have to then exit out of the app and then text that person and be like, hey, thanks for sending that playlist. It's awkward and uncomfortable. So that is my biggest gripe with Spotify. Otherwise, this isn't a company that's this isn't Universal Music. This is a company that's only been in the US for this is their 4th year. And they're trying to do something that is overwhelmingly difficult to do. For years, people have been trying to do this, and they sifted through the music industry bullshit well enough and baited them in by giving them stock, and they sold them on this big IPO, and they managed to get it done. And so I think that we need to be nicer to Spotify. I think where everyone's just way too nasty to them. And I understand Spotify kind of has a reputation for being kind of, cooler than thou as far as people and as a company. And that's been my experience too. Everyone I've ever met from Spotify is way too cool to hang out with me. But I think that being said, it's a hell of a cool product. And it is setting the standard, and it's creating this conversation for everybody. So yeah, everybody's going to lose a little bit of money for a little while, but I kind of feel like people are forgetting about the fact that this was all going down before there was an alternative. There's no shortage of people that think $1.29 is too much to pay to listen to a song. No shortage of people. So that's my vibe there. So there's plenty that Spotify could do to improve itself. I think that I would rather see somebody new come out and improve on it. Yeah. I think that I wish Beats Music would have lasted for longer, and I wish we would get Deezer over here, and I wish Google Play Music was 40 times better than it is. I think if that stuff happens, I think we'll start to see a lot of the changes that people are hoping for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forget, it's hard as a college student to justify paying for music as a music student, but I like to pay for someone's t-shirt, and I like to $10 for Spotify every month. It's not.
It's $5 if you're a college student. You can get
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a lot easier to justify that and then buy different merch that from the band that ends up advertising them more than just listening to their song.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so,
the other big part of this too is catalog becomes way more valuable. So it's early days, but let's assume that 50% of the digital music that was listened to on Spotify. Catalog would become much, much, much more valuable because people don't listen to just new music all the time. So, there's a lot of really cool economic consequences of Spotify working. how about it'd be certainly closer to a meritocracy, not to like, I know this is the marketing show and that I'm being represented here as a marketer, but as a fan of music, you know, in the 90s, like the money didn't go to the best band. The money went to the band that got the most amount of marketing and sold as many $15 shiny discs as humanly possible. Like, the streaming model is based on how often people listen to your music, which is a much cooler way of thinking about it to me than like how many people bought your album that you couldn't return, by the way, for years and years and years. You bought an album at Best Buy, you couldn't return it, you know? So it certainly wasn't a meritocracy. There were a lot of bad bands out there making lots of money.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like bands creating new products? Like now that bands aren't necessarily making money from people buying a CD, like I'd really like to see a band like make apps and stuff, like promote their band in different ways.
It happens. It's happening a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think especially by the smart people, you know, like a great band, this band Data Life made a plugin for like this amazingly awesome, useful plugin called the Sausage Patterner for music production that I love. It's a great product. And what a cool way to promote their stuff to a completely different audience, man. That sold me on Data Life big time.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, man, we made so many crazy products with Hi-Fi Dragons. I think that's the way to go. Yeah. Is to make things that people are actually willing to pay for. I don't think it's outrageous that people aren't willing to pay for music anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not as cool as it was. Like, and it's free on the internet. And the internet happened. What are you gonna do? Cry about it?
Yeah. Milena, do you have anything?
Yeah. Well, I know you teach a music industry studies class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what does that kind of look like for you? What are like some of the most important aspects that you teach the students, and what are some things that you just like to emphasize? Well,
this is the first semester I've ever done that, so yeah. I'm new to this whole thing. I studied. That's what I studied in college, and so it was. I don't know. It was kind of a coup for me. It's something I've always wanted to do, is to come back and like kind of come back to where I'm from and see if I can't like contribute to something. Yeah, I do. I'm very optimistic about the future in the music industry, but so I kind of want to connect with like maybe the next generation and network preemptively, since they'll be running things. But the most important thing is to not follow convention. You know, like that's the thing that I'm constantly disappointed that even young people are doing, is trying to follow convention or trying to think of like the rules. Like there's some sort of certain set of knowledge that once you have this certain set of knowledge, it's all going to be really easy. When the reality is like, this is sort of one of the hardest businesses, if not the hardest business in the country. And so the spoils are going to go to the people that are most creative and the people that break the rules, you know? So if there's one thing overwhelmingly that I reinforce to students is like, my classes haven't been super information heavy. Certainly there's some information as it's pertinent, but I try not to represent new topics without looking at kind of like the why of why were things this way? Why are things this way now? Because they're not likely to stay the same. And so I think critical thinking skills are clutch in the music business. There's one thing I can overwhelmingly encourage, is that people ask a lot of questions and be willing to break all of the rules all the time. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
So what would you say has been like one of your most creative marketing plans?
We did a lot of fun stuff with Hi-Fi Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
This band Hi-Fi Dragons is like a nerdy Nintendo rock band. And I tried to go to all the places. I tried to really, really, really reinforce everything we did in those communities in nerdier communities. So we got really involved with the WWE campaign that we did. We got really, really involved with, we came up with interesting ways to package music and to sell a high dollar product to people that really wanted to be early adopters, you know? So, yeah, that most of the best creative stuff we did, I think, was there. Yeah, definitely. I don't know. Lots of the nerdy stuff. The WWE thing was pretty fun, because we like predicted who would win a match, and then tweeted at the person who would win that match, and then that person retweeted us, and so then we kind of got into the middle of wrestling promos and stuff, which was yeah, which was funny because the guy we picked ended up winning, and nobody thought he was going to win. And everyone's like, "How did they know?" And then there was all these conspiracy theories on among wrestling fans, like, "Oh, did they tell them like what they broke kayfabe? Blah 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 blah." And that was pretty fun. That was really
That's awesome.
That's all. Anyway.
Yeah, and I know like during class one day you went into more depth about like that early adopter program with Fight Dragons. Could you like speak on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I wish I could take more credit for that. That was Brian from Fight Dragons, is like kind of his idea. So this is, you know, the idea was we had a $10,000 shortfall on a tour, and we needed 10 grand, and it comes down to the fundamentals. Like, okay, with our audience, which is small, really small, what's a product that we can make that we can make $10,000 on? So if we can sell $100 products, then we're good. And so we made, it was the early days for the band, but we were like, here, for $100, you get a membership card. It's a USB drive. It has all of the music the band's ever made. We'll keep your email address and your name on file. We're going to send you every piece of music or video that the band ever makes for the rest of their career. And we'll guest list you for all the band shows if they come to your town for the rest of their career. Knowing that, like, yeah, my dog is flipping out over that. Knowing that, you know, the fans, they know that there's a possibility that they may never come to their town. We have people in Australia buy those and Ben still hasn't been to Australia, but we're forthright about that, because like that's a tremendous value. If you like a band and you believe that a band is going to be a thing, it's like that might turn into 20 concert tickets for $100, you know? So that was kind of the idea, is that making a product that was super, super valuable to the people that were super, super interested. You know, people that had a cursory understanding of that band, or maybe weren't that interested in that band, would never give us $100. But we were fortunate enough to have a small contingent of fans that are really, really passionate, really dedicated, and it was really easy to sell 100 of those. So we sold 100 of them in one day, and we went on the tour. So it's cool. It was a big win.
Cool.
So do you have any projects you're working on right now that you're excited about?
I have a couple of projects that I'm working on right now that I'm pretty excited about, but I don't know if I can talk about them just yet. I've been experimenting with a couple. So there's a couple ideas in the tech world that I'm still working with. I will say one is about trying to get fan club ticketing back in the hands of the artists. So I think that easily the most corrupt sector of the music industry right now, far and away, is the ticketing business. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that if you want to make more money for artists, you kind of look at the places that are the most corrupt. That is a sector of the business is super corrupt, and I think that artists are selling their own tickets pretty frequently now. And I think most artists don't take advantage of laws that are in place so that they can sell 10% of the room directly to their fans. So I'm working on one thing for that. In that world, it's about as far as I can go. Working on a couple other like tech solutions for the business of booking shows. I think that I worked in the agency business for a while, and I think that there's a lot of inefficiencies there. And I think that there's so many great agents right now that I think the agency business is different from other businesses in that you can handle a lot more clients than a manager or a label can, or a product manager or an A&R guy. So there's a couple toolkits that I'm going to build for agents that I'd really like to get done. And there's a couple bands that I'm thinking about managing. I've been producing a couple records in Chicago right now too. So there's a lot of stuff. I usually work on like 10 different things, and then I tend to not talk about them until they're already really famous, so that I can look like a big shot. Otherwise, you're just kind of like some guy who's working on a bunch of stuff that nobody's heard of.
Yes.
Which is how everybody starts, right? That's the idea.
Yeah.
It's just your overnight successes usually take a couple of years to do. So,
yeah.
I think that's all of them. I'm also thinking I got one more. Well, this is one actually. If anybody's interested in working on this one, especially locally, but the artist management business is really, really. I think the biggest inefficiency in the artist management business. I always like to work with developing artists, so it's. I've never worked on anything easy, and it's very rare that anybody like at a label or whatever brings me something. I wish they would. I wish they'd call and say, "Hey, we got this superstar artist, manage this for us," and then I could automatically get paid. I think that'd be awesome. That hasn't been my experience, so I'm usually picking stuff up that's like, nobody believes in until it's already a thing. And so I'm working on kind of like trying to make the crudest, most lightweight, most artist fair record label services business to kind of support my management stuff. So the next time I sign a band, I don't have to kiss everybody's ass for 12 months before I can get that thing some exposure. If I could have my own little machine that would help get some exposure so that I would only have to kiss ass for like 3 months, but that'd be really nice. That'd be really cool. So that's the other project.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. So like with music being free, like not actually, but like on the internet, pretty much everything's free. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, we kind of went over that with Spotify and everything, but with it being free already, like, do you actually think of yourself as marketing the music, or?
Yeah. Again, that's gonna vary project to project,
Yeah.
Not to get all hippy dippy here, but like, music should be free.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Music's free. It is free. The package that it comes in might have cost something, like a CD, a packet costs something. The convenience by which you get it to your phone should cost something. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, if music is free, it's already free. People can go on YouTube and listen to your music. That's what it is. So you can argue about it, and we kind of all argue about it, but it doesn't change the fact that that's going to be how it is. So I tend to, that doesn't mean that you don't market the music, because it's kind of like, the irony that people have always kind of said, well, it's maybe the music's a commercial or whatever. Dog, my dog is just really wants to be part of this. Hi. But like, music is also the greatest form of advertising that you could possibly come up with. Mm-hmm. So it's like a great show. It's still a great show. I mean, I think everyone can kind of relate to a time that they went to go see a great show and they love that band forever, or you hear, like the first time I heard the Lord single, Royals, the first time I heard that song, I remember pulling over the car and being like, this is going to be the biggest song in the world. Like, and I'm a Lord fan, Mm-hmm. So I'll buy whatever she's selling. She sells something, like, and I think that that's kind of, artists and musicians have a tremendous power to brand that brands don't have. Mm-hmm. So if no one cares as much about Ford as they do about whatever, Lady Gaga, nobody. And Ford makes cars, sure, but you don't care that much about the brand. The product has to be good. You might buy a car. You won't buy it just because it's a Ford. Some people will, but less and less as time goes on. Artists are the exact opposite, where people feel that art is art. So if somebody writes a song that moves you, your allegiance to that artist is heavy, and therefore the products that artist makes might appeal to you. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's music is still an extremely powerful tool. And if it's not it's a tremendous thing to productize around. I might like, here, listen to this record, even though I know I'm not going to make any money off them listening to it. Oh, when'd you leave?
Are you still there? Sorry, my internet. Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Could you restate that? Sorry. The camera's like.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, I got you. Hello.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now too.
Yeah. What part? Where's me? I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so everything's back to normal now. Could you just state what you were saying? It kind of got cut off towards the middle.
Okay, cool. Sure. I was saying that the music is a great thing to buy around, if it's not a product in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no to companies that turn on the TV, you see different ways that they can convince you to care about them, their company, the products. So you care about Taco Bell and therefore buy a taco. If it was just about selling the best tacos, then Taco Bell would already be out of business, right? Yeah. But a lot of effort preserving that brand. Artists are the opposite, because if you hear a great song or something like that and you really love it, even if people aren't buying that song, their allegiance to you and your ability to create products is going to be there, because you're connecting immediately from an emotional place. You're not trying to take tacos and make them emotional. You're taking emotion, and then you just got to come up with whatever your tacos are going to be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a weird one. That's a weird analogy. But I think that's important to think about. So maybe you're not selling music, but you do want to raise awareness of music, and you want people to listen to the music, because if it connects with them, then you have a fan. Mm-hmm. And then your challenge is to make products. Conversely, most companies in America make products and they struggle with creating fans.
Yeah. Okay. So with marketing, where do you see that going in the next 5 years?
Whew. I think it's going to start getting a little dirty. I think we're at a turning point in social media where people are getting really, really, really good at clickbait and subversive marketing, ways to create social phenomena. So I think in the digital space, it's going to get kind of weird. I think it's going to be like kind of a weird future dystopian kind of Black Mirror thing. You're going to see a lot more of that. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, marketing will continue down this trend that, I feel like Seth Godin called years and years ago, where maybe there's less of a mainstream and there's just lots of big streams. And I think that's going to be so much of where the future is for marketing. I think that people will wise up and realize that you can't sell everything to everyone. Find your niche and go for your niche, and that those niches are really big. I think that was a soapbox of mine many years ago, and especially when I was trying to make the nerd music thing work. But even also in politics, Flobots is a deeply political project, and it was segmented. It was not a mainstream concept, So that's always kind of been my soapbox, and now I feel like that's becoming more obvious. You can't sell everything to everyone. You find your niche, and then you go with it, because the niches are bigger than they ever were. And I think you'll see a lot more of that. I mean, case in point, the two biggest TV shows on the air right now are, A Song of Ice and Fire and The Walking Dead. It's like you take two niches, like people that read The Walking Dead, and got stoked about the idea there's going to be a TV show. I was at Comic-Con that year. I was stoked that they were going to make a TV show. Now it's the #1 show on TV. Mm-hmm. like Game of Thrones was too nerdy for me. I didn't read those books until recently.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest shows on TV. So the niches are becoming the mainstream. Guardians of the Galaxy is the #1 movie in America. It's like not even close to the most popular comic book. It's like a kind of a niche comic in the Marvel universe. So I think that you'll see a lot more of that. People marketing to niches and subcultures getting a heck of a lot more attention than they did in the past.
Okay. With like all the clickbait stuff on the internet, like, how do you feel about that in like music? Do you think like we'll start seeing more like clickbait stuff in like the music industry, or do you see it like it's gonna go more towards that niche thing?
Yeah, I'm going to take you with me as I let my dog back in right now. So come with me on a journey through the house. Yeah, definitely. 100%. It's 100%. It's going to get more clickbaity. It always has. It's been like the music industry is actually, in the early days of digital, like the spammiest industry of all. Like, I mean, that was... certainly when I was at Universal, that was something that I fought with people about a lot. It's like, that's spammy, that's spammy, that's spammy. Yeah. You know, the music business is not the tech business. It's far from it. So I think the music business will do everything. All of the worst ideas will get done by the music industry first. and then they'll learn, and then they'll move on, and blah, 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 blah. But, you know, yeah, it's going to get tricky, you know, and I think you're starting to see that weird kind of spammy stuff infect all sectors of all different kinds of industries. You know, You can buy a Kindle right now for $20 less if you get it. You know, if you let them market ads to you while you're reading. So, you know, like they're recognizing an opportunity in the market. Like there's an opportunity in the market where people will pay less to be spammed to more, and that's going to happen. It's going to happen a lot, I think.
Yeah.
Unless people start paying for Spotify. If everybody starts paying for Spotify, it's going to get a lot less weird.
Why?
If that. Well, Spotify's got to make money somehow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. They're going to have to be more aggressive in their ads and generating royalty and generating revenue for the free product. So, can't preserve the user experience like this forever. Not when you got investors, and God forbid they ever go public, which will happen. Spotify will go public in the next 2 or 3 years probably. Okay. And when that happens, they're going to have to make money somehow, unless people are willing to pay for it. So, yeah.
So, like, what do you see happening with that?
Ugh, I don't know. I don't want to be the harbinger of doom. I could think of it. You know, you see bands and stuff do that now, where stuff gets really weird. Like, you know, you want to check out the song, but you have to sign up for the email list. And if you sign up for the email list, you also have to like us on Facebook before you can enter to win tickets to this, that, the other. And you're starting to see some of that stuff taper off or get less weird. But at the end of the day, the music industry is the most desperate industry of them all, because it's hurting. It's been hurting. Though it's very hard to follow convention. So I feel like a lot of experimentation happens there. I have friends that are in data analysis, where people are trying to collect user data from artists' fans and stuff like that, and then sell that to big companies. That stuff's going to happen, you know. So that's maybe one worth paying attention to in the future, is artists collecting user data. That might happen. Certainly labels collecting user data, or partnering with tech companies that will collect lots of user data and then selling that to third parties. I'd be surprised if that's not already happening in some regard, but that might be something that happens a lot more in the future. Yeah. I hope not, but it's reasonable. There's a lot of money in that business. Yeah.
So, like, as a marketer, like, all these things wouldn't be happening if they didn't work somewhat well. So would you ever consider doing that for a band that you manage, or
selling user data?
No, not selling user data, but getting like really spammy, like signing up for emails and then liking them on Facebook before they get access to you.
Nah, man, that ain't me. I'll ask people to sign up for a mailing list in exchange for an album download. Like, I think that's very reasonable. Like, hey, here's a download of the album for free. Just
Yeah.
give me your email address, and so I can tell you when I'm playing a show. But I'm again, this is another one of those things where it's like, okay, well, easier to say on my own than it is when you're in the label system.
Yeah.
But I'm a hacker first. Like I start as a nerd. I bleed nerd. I'm tragically trapped in the music industry, but I'm a nerd first. And that stuff is really important to me. I'm very, very, very strongly opinionated about user experience, and I do not I absolutely stubbornly and probably to my own defeat, I want to make sure that we take care of our fans always. And so I avoid spamminess as much as humanly possible in every scenario.
Yeah.
Did you lose me? It says it just told me my video shut off, and I get to see a picture of me.
So again, I have your audio, but your video shut off for a little bit.
I think I'm back. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, everyone got to see me sitting on a bench.
Well, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking to us about like your own values and stuff. Do you think that, like, being in the industry, there's values and characteristics and traits that like help you be more successful?
Well, I said earlier I was like the Ned Stark of Universal Music Group, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes your values don't help you. I think sometimes your values don't make you more successful. There's a ruthlessness in the music industry that's gonna stick around, and I think that I'm certainly not encouraging that, but I think to get to the top in this business, you got to be a little harder than maybe I've been. I think that it's something that's hurt me more than it's helped me. At the same time, loyalty is very valuable to me. And I think that on some level, my friends have helped me out when I was down because I was loyal to them, and because like at the end of the day, like not to be all egotistical, but I'm absolutely smart enough to make more money in any other business but this, if it was about money. So I'm a pretty ethical guy. And I think that people have people respect that, have people won't. I think that you'll go farther in this business if you can play politics really well, and maybe if you're a little more cutthroat. But I think you'll have a happier life and a more meaningful connection to the art you make if you stick true to your own values. So, yeah. And to the point that I was making before, people can feel, and this applies to tech too, but like people can feel sincerity. People can feel when you respect them. So if you don't respect your fans and if you don't treat them well, it'll hurt you. And I think conversely, if you treat them well and if you're respectful with their information, you're respectful with their process, you treat them well, you like reward them and let them know that you value the fact they care about you, you can get a lot more. You can certainly have a deeper connection with your fans over a longer period of time by taking care of them. So I think on the other hand, that's something that's really helped me is thinking about the customer. And that's something that doesn't happen a lot in the music business, thinking about the customer. We tend to focus a lot more on artists, what's fair to artists, and are we really taking care of artists? Are we doing blah, 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 which is all good and well, but how's the customer feel? Are we making the best record that we can make? Is this record worth the money we're asking for it? Is this show awesome? Are people going to have one of the, I want every concert that I'm behind to be the best show that someone's seen that year. Certainly for the money. I mean, if someone pays a $20 ticket, I want them to feel like it's not a $40 show. And that stuff helps big time. Like people can feel it,
Yeah. So with you saying how cutthroat the industry, like that's something that's said by a lot of industry professionals, but could you give an example of like where you like we're just getting started and we're really surprised by like what lengths people are willing to go through to like get ahead in this industry?
I don't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Yeah.
and for the most part, my experience has been great.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've worked with more good people than I've worked with bad people, but you know, Avery Littman, who is a co-president of Universal Republic, he told me when I was 24 years old, he's like, success reveals people more than it changes people. And I think that's a very sardonic approach, but I always come back to that and think that maybe not reveals the core of people, but money and success and fame and all of the weird psychological hangups in the music business tend to highlight some of the worst things about people and maybe make people do things they wouldn't otherwise do. Mm-hmm. Can you still hear me, by the way? It's getting kind of blurry.
It's kind of choppy, but we can hear you pretty clearly.
All right. Cool. So I think that part of why people that are aggressive and cutthroat and hardened in this business, why they're able to stay on the test of time, is that on one hand, you don't take betrayals as personally, and you don't take as much guff from other people. I think on the other hand, you're sharp enough to cut through a lot of the bullshit. Mm-hmm. So people that stand up for themselves do well. So, I mean, that's kind of a part of it. I think that otherwise good people sometimes just get caught up in all the rigmarole. It's a big fame and celebrity are hugely confusing experiences for people. I think politics are hard. The music business has got just so much tradition of being so screwed up that I think good people sometimes don't do great things. So, and it reveals the worst parts of us in a lot of ways. So that's that. I'm going to say that's been my whole experience. I feel like you're always fighting that. So I wish that I could say that, like, that it's worked out for me trying to be a nice guy, but being a nice guy isn't always the best thing. So I think sometimes being a nice guy has hurt me more than it's helped me, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have changed a thing. I'd rather be me. Yeah. But I could probably gone a lot farther in my career if I was a total jerk. Mm-hmm. I think.
Cool.
Not to be like a total bummer. There are some people that are really successful that are really, really nice all the time. I'm sure. I haven't met any of them, but I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah, so I don't have any more questions. Milena, do you have any?
No, I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
Cool, man. I'm glad.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I think that's it for today.
Cool. But, awesome. My pleasure.
Yeah, so if you enjoyed it, this show is on every Monday at 6:30. And you can check out my website at www.shapingtheindustry.com and my Twitter, Zach Suter Music. And you can check out JJ's Twitter at JJ Italiano. So I think that's it. The VOD should be up tomorrow on YouTube. So yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thank you guys.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks.